Hey everyone, Aaron here. Welcome back to the channel. We're going to do something light today. A viewer asked me to comment on some videos that a Scientologist posted to TikTok. The Scientologist name is Michaela Arrington. I can't tell if this person lives in Clearwater or California. The TikTok videos make it seem like Clearwater. Facebook makes it seem like California. I think these videos serve as a really good example of just how much BS Scientologists believe about their own group. These videos are really short. Let's take a look at them and I'll provide some commentary. But before we do, I have forgotten to make my sponsorship plug in my last few videos. So if you are looking to buy or sell any home or property in the Tampa Bay area and you would like to work with me, message me at aaron@dreamrealty.com. All right, let's take a look at the first one. Okay, well that was really short. Those questions went by a little bit too fast for me. Let's just take screenshots of the questions and see what's going on there. Do you worship aliens? Nope, we don't worship anyone. Look, when I was a Scientologist, I would have answered the question that exact same way. We don't worship anyone. And even now that I'm not a Scientologist, I would probably still say Scientologists don't worship anyone. It just depends on what you mean by worship. Worship has a very religious, spiritual, deity connotation. And in that connotation, Scientologists don't worship anyone. However, when I first became exposed to evangelical Christianity, I was at a meeting of evangelical Christian pastors, and the head pastor was up at the podium. This was the meeting was about Scientology. And the head pastor was up there at the podium with a Bible in his hand, just like a Scientologist would normally be up there with some sort of LRH policy or LRH book to reference. And the pastor was talking about the Bible, was quoting from the Bible in the exact same way that a Scientologist would talk about and quote from LRH policy. And it was sort of a, well, you could call it a come to Jesus moment. I'd spent my entire life thinking, we don't worship L. Ron Hubbard, we don't worship L. Ron Hubbard, we don't worship L. Ron Hubbard. And then I'm sitting there and I'm looking at a guy who very, very much worships Jesus and God, and he's referring to his Bible and the words in the Bible in the exact same way that a Scientologist would do with LRH's writings. And it sort of, what do they say? It gave me pause. And I was like, oh my God, we have convinced ourselves that we didn't worship L. Ron Hubbard. But in practical terms, we worshiped the words of L. Ron Hubbard, the exact same way that an evangelical or Christian would worship the words of Jesus or the words in the Bible. So it depends on how you want to define it. It depends on how you want to look at it. But she's at least honestly answering the question. Is this a cult? Do you need help? Not a cult. I can stop being a Scientologist whenever I want to. Scientology is all over the world, recognized in all countries. I bet that she actually believes that Scientology is recognized as a religion in all countries. It's actually not. It's not recognized in Australia. I don't even believe it's recognized in the UK. It's not recognized in France. It's not recognized in Germany. In Germany, it's considered a dangerous cult. You're not allowed to work for the government in Germany if you're a Scientologist. Now, Germany doesn't have the best track record on things like tolerance and inclusivity, but they've been working on making up for that a lot since the 30s. And it just is worth noting that you are literally not allowed to work for the German government if you're a Scientologist. So let's see. I can stop being a Scientologist whenever I want to. Sure, that's true. And then every Scientologist you've ever known or been friends with, or any Scientologists that are in your family, will be forced to disconnect from you. So is she being honest? Can she stop being a Scientologist whenever she wants to? Sure. Are there consequences? Of course. Scientology is all over the world. Scientology is all over the world, not in very large numbers, but it is. And it is recognized in all countries. Well, we've already covered that. That's total BS. But I believe that she believes it. What's the next part? What is it? What do you believe? It's a science-based philosophy. Everything you do in Scientology is just applying science to your life. You can also find all references for anything you read. Nothing is opinionated. That has to arguably be one of the stupidest things I have ever heard a Scientologist say about Scientology. Now, in her defense, she's a relatively young person. She may be demonstrating a lower than average intelligence with a statement like this, but I think beyond that, she's showing that she just thinks about things in a very childish, simplistic way, which kind of makes sense when you think about how quickly she has fallen for Scientology, kind of like Tampa Brad, who I've discussed a lot on my channel. If you haven't seen any of those videos, I'll post a link to one of them above. So it's a science-based philosophy. So for her to even say that, you know, for anything to be a science, I think at the core of whether something is a science is whether it applies the scientific method to itself, whether people in the subject are encouraged to apply the scientific method, whether things are encouraged to be tested and retested and tested again. There's literally nothing scientific about Scientology. There is not one single aspect of the Scientology belief system, nothing L. Ron Hubbard ever said or wrote about Scientology that could be called scientific. Many Scientologists tend to think that the use of the e-meter in auditing sessions somehow makes Scientology scientific. And, you know, I probably was guilty of thinking the same way when I was in Scientology, but it's silly, it's absurd, it's not true. Everything you do in Scientology is just applying science to your life. Now, even when I was a Scientologist, I wouldn't have said something as stupid as this. Applying Scientology to your life is not applying science to your life. And I'll even go so far as to say Scientology and Scientologists don't actually say that it is. This is not something that is actually common to hear Scientologists say. This is just a stupid statement. And honestly, what makes it even dumber is that it's not just something you're saying off the cuff and maybe if you had another chance you'd take it back. Like, she wrote this. She wrote this and she put it in a video and she edited it and she left it in a video. She thought about it. She decided that's what she wanted to say and she said it. So no, that's just really dumb. You can also find all references for anything you read. I don't even know what that means. Like, yeah, there's an like, what does that mean? If you're reading an LRH book, the reference is the LRH book. LRH doesn't send you to other references. So I don't even know what that means. Nothing is opinionated. I think what she means by that is that in Scientology, you're actually not allowed to have an opinion about what it is you've read. If you were to ask, if you're studying a course and you're reading an LRH book and you go, I don't know what this means, and you ask your course supervisor, he's actually literally not allowed to tell you what it means. The supervisor would just go, well, what is your material state? And if you go, well, I don't know, I got no fucking idea what this means, I don't understand it. He would just go, well, what word didn't you understand in the sentence or preceding the sentence or in the previous page? If the supervisor was actually caught explaining to someone what something meant, he'd actually get in quite a lot of bit of trouble. So, and again, she thinks this is a good thing. She thinks it's a good thing that you're not allowed to think about and interpret and have opinions about what you read. Everything is just supposed to be taken literally. All right, what's next? In fact, Scientology, the word means knowing how to know. Scientology's closest cousin is Buddhism. Scientology's main motto is what's true for you. So if it's not okay for you, then that's okay. See, even in Scientology, I knew that this was bullshit. Like, even when I was a true believer, I knew this was bullshit. Yeah, the etymology of the word Scientology very well might mean knowing how to know. That's fine. LRH describes it a few different ways. Knowing how to know, or the study of knowledge, or whatever. Scientology's closest cousin is Buddhism. Now, not a lot of people know that Scientologists are actually told by LRH, it's very strongly implied, you're very much led to believe, that LRH is actually the reincarnation of Buddhism. Or in the Buddhist philosophy, he would be the Maitreya or the Maitreya. There's a book called Hymn of Asia that LRH wrote. You actually can't buy it. Even in Scientology, you cannot buy it. But the book does exist in almost every Scientology organization. And in this book, LRH claims to have been Buddha. And Scientologists think that when LRH was Buddha, he created Buddhism, and the end result of applying or practicing Buddhism is the state of Bodhi or Bodhi, I don't know if I'm getting it right, and that LRH basically determined after he dropped the body of, ended that lifetime, that what he thought he had accomplished with that Buddhist state was only temporary, and he needed to come back to create and develop Dianetics and Scientology to create a permanent state of Bodhi, and that is in Scientology known as the state of clear. Now, don't get it twisted. Scientologists don't know a damn thing about Buddhism unless they've actually studied Buddhism before getting into Scientology. That's because when you're in Scientology, you're not allowed to study and practice other religions. So, for the most part, Scientologists have no idea whether what Hubbard says about anything to do with Buddhism is true or not. They're just taking his word for it. But what she says here reflects everything I just said. LRH says he was Buddha. He sort of says that Scientology is kind of Buddhism 2.0. But other than the L. Ron Hubbard and then past life Buddha connection, I never would have said, when I was a true believer, that Scientology's closest cousin was Buddhism. That's not something that would have actually resonated with me. Scientology's main motto is what's true for you. This is total bullshit. This is something that L. Ron Hubbard wrote in one of a gazillion essays that exists in Scientology. It's included as a quote in the introduction of every introductory course in Scientology. And the reason it's there is so that when you're studying a lower level course in Scientology and you read something you don't agree with, the course supervisor can just go, that's okay. That's okay, you don't have to agree with it. We're not an overbearing religion that makes you think something is true just because we've said it's true. We're very permissive and liberal, and it's only true if it's true for you. That's just a tool to allow people to get over the things in the early courses that they don't actually agree with. That's not true when you get to real Scientology. Okay, that's it for that video. There was a second follow-up video that she posted that I thought would be worth commenting on. Let's take a look at that.
So my last video that I made about the misconceptions of Scientology got a lot of hate, which I didn't really expect anything different, but the main point that I got on there was that Scientology is a cult. So in this video, I wanted to go over the definition of what a cult is and then what Scientology is. I also want to preface this video by saying that I'm not trying to make you a Scientologist. I'm not here to recruit people. I'm here to talk about the religion and the philosophy that I follow and my experiences in it. And if you don't want to watch, you don't have to watch. Now, Scientology has 11,000 plus churches around the entire world, 167 nations, if I'm correct.
I believe that she believes that. And that's what's really sad. Because any Scientologist knows that there are less than 200 actual churches of Scientology in the world. When I say actual, I mean the kind of church of Scientology where you can go in and you can do the entire bottom half of the bridge. There are smaller types of organizations called missions, and I don't even count these missions because there's almost no criteria for what can be a mission. Joe Blow Scientologist can pay the church $30,000 for a mission starter package. He can have a mission, he can have it in his house. He can open a mission in his house and be, okay, my living room is gonna become a course room and I'm gonna operate it for 9 hours, 3 hours on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 9 hours a week. That's not a real Scientology organization. So, you have less than 200 orgs in the entire world. Maybe if you throw in missions, there's another 200 or 300. That's it. And yet she's saying 11,000 because the church says 11,000. And someone like Michaela, members like Michaela, they just swallow it whole. And they go, oh, wow, that's amazing. Scientology is all over the world. There's millions and millions of Scientologists. 11,000 organizations. That's incredible. But if you were to ask her, Michaela, where are they? How many churches of Scientology are there in Florida? She'd probably think about them and she'd probably come up with about 5. And if you're like, Michaela, if there's only 5 Scientology organizations in all of Florida, one of the most populous states in the United States, where in the hell do you think the other 10,995 organizations are? And she wouldn't be able to answer the question, but it doesn't prevent her from genuinely believing what she just said. It's a really strange contradiction. I think it speaks to just a cult mentality way of thinking where the evidence that what you're being told, what you're believing, what you're regurgitating, the evidence that this is false is not only so obvious, but it's right in front of your eyes. It's right in front of your eyes. If you were only allowed to think critically about it, it would be so obvious to you. But the cult mindset way of thinking is such that despite the evidence being right there in front of her, she doesn't see it. All right, let's see what else she says.
And this point will be relevant later. A definition of a cult is a system of religious veneration and devotion directed toward a particular figure or object, or a relatively small group of people whose religious beliefs are particularly regarded by others as strange or sinister. Now, point 1, we don't worship L. Ron Hubbard. L. Ron Hubbard, among other people, are the ones that did the research for the books that we read.
And I know I already touched on it, so I won't be long-winded about this, but it did just occur to me that when I was a Scientologist, the reason it felt totally true to say that we didn't worship him is because Scientologists don't think of L. Ron Hubbard as a god. But if you take the criteria that you have to think of someone as a god, if you remove that as a criteria for worship, in every other sense of the word, Scientologists do in fact worship L. Ron Hubbard.
The author of the books, we read the books, we use the data. There is no weird worshiping to L. Ron Hubbard or alien gods or whatever.
There isn't an alien God, that's true. Well, Scientologists don't believe in a God, so there isn't any kind of God. Although Scientologists do believe in aliens, they don't believe in alien gods.
Two is that, like I said earlier, we are not a small group of people. We are not this secretive group of people. We are millions of Scientologists around the world in 167 nations who are abiding by the laws of...
She genuinely believes there's millions of Scientologists. And if you were to ask her, Michaela, what's the last major international Scientology event that you attended that David Miscavige was personally speaking at live? Whether it was in LA in California or here in Clearwater in Florida. And you asked her how many people were at that event, she would know that there were not likely to be more than 3, maximum 5,000 Scientologists at whatever the most recent live Miscavige event was. And that's being incredibly generous. It's probably closer to 2,500, 3,000. And this is despite the fact that Los Angeles and Clearwater are widely known to be the most populated, dense hubs of Scientologists in the entire world. And when David Miscavige is speaking live at an event, Scientologists are expected to be there. And you go, Michaela, I don't understand. You're telling me that at a live Miscavige event in Los Angeles at the Shrine Auditorium, they couldn't scrounge up more than 5,000 Scientologists to come and see dear leader speak? And even if you got her to agree that there was only about 3, maybe max 5,000 people that they could scrounge up in all of Southern California to come and see Miscavige speak, this would still not be evidence to her that there's not millions of Scientologists in the world. The real number of Scientologists is 25 to 30,000 at the absolute utmost. I even did a video doing a breakdown by organization and by continent. I'll put a link to it up above. I'm gonna redo the video now that I'm getting a little more clever with my video editing graphic techniques. But yeah, Scientologists genuinely believe there's millions of members when it's closer to 30,000 at the most.
167 nations. So if we were killing people or hurting people or locking people up or eating babies, you would know about it and we would be closed down by now. We've been open and functioning, I think, since the 50s. Now, I've been in Scientology for 5 years. I grew up as a Christian, and then I just found that Scientology worked better for me because it's not a faith-based religion. It's a religion or philosophy based off of science. I know OT8s, I know Sea Org members, I know people that used to be in the Sea Org that left the Sea Org, I know the people that used to be in Scientology that left Scientology. Like, it's not that crazy. If you enter Scientology,
If she says that she knows people who were in Scientology and left Scientology, what she really means is she knows someone who used to be on course and they no longer do course, but they've never said anything negative about Scientology publicly. They've never gone to the press. They don't knowingly associate with people that Scientology says are bad people, like myself. And in those circumstances, it is possible for someone like that to just kind of fade away into the distance, to just, you know, go off into the sunset and not get declared and not be considered an enemy of Scientology. And so what she's doing is a little bit of doublespeak, because when you hear about Scientology enforcing disconnection, it's when someone gets declared a suppressive person, and that's sort of Scientology saying, we are expelling you from Scientology. And yet Scientology will expel someone for an offense as minor as refusing to disconnect from another family member who's been expelled from Scientology. So Michaela's using this phrase, I know people who've left Scientology, but they haven't officially left. They've just floated off quietly into the sunset so as not to draw the ire of Scientology.
The books that you're reading, all of these books and lectures. Also, on the whole brainwashing thing and drug use and whatever, Scientology actually funds a non-for-profit for a drug-free world and a non-for-profit commission on human rights, which are to tell you what your human rights are and also why street drugs are bad and how to get help if you need help getting off of drugs. We also have volunteer ministers, which just like any other religion like Christianity, they have volunteer ministers where they go out to crisis areas and they help out. We do that too. So if we were a cult, we would want you to be on drugs so that you were easily more manipulated, and we would want you to not know what your human rights are so that we can manipulate that. So I'm here to answer any of your guys' questions, but Scientology isn't a cult.
She makes this weird statement, if we were a cult, we would want you on drugs. I've got no idea what she's even talking about there. But I think it's very cute that she uses some of Scientology's what they call their social betterment activities. Things like the Narcanon, the Criminon, the Youth for Human Rights, the volunteer ministers. She uses them in this video in the exact way that Scientology intends for them to be used, which is, what? All these former members are accusing us of human rights abuses? That couldn't even be possible. We have an entire organization dedicated to educating people about human rights abuses. Like, it really is almost like a little too much. Like, hey guys, if we create an organization, we print out all these pamphlets and we hand them out to children, educating them about this on the subject of human rights and what are your human rights, nobody would ever believe that we could be some of the largest human traffickers in the Tampa Bay region. Like, it really is almost a little too much on the nose. But it's definitely too much to expect Michaela to be able to take a step back from everything she's involved in right now and examine it for what it is and see the truth of it. And it's a shame because she's young. Hopefully she doesn't get sucked into staff. Hopefully she doesn't get sucked into the Sea Org. Just like I would say for Tampa Brad, I would hope that Michaela somehow finds her way out of Scientology sooner rather than later. And when that day comes, if Michaela or even Brad for that matter need any help leaving Scientology, that's what the Aftermath Foundation exists for. That's what we're here for. That's what we do. And if they need help, they will certainly get it. All right, everyone, that's all I have for now. Thank you for watching. Thank you to everyone who watches until the very end, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right here. Bye.